Hi, it's Makaela here. Thanks for listening to my podcast. What you're about to listen to is an old episode of my podcast, The Midlife Awakening, which has now been replaced with the Deliberately Transformed Woman podcast. You'll still find some golden takeaways in these old episodes, but if you're the type of person who wants to discover and let go of the things that are holding you back in life by busting through fear and procrastination, overcoming imposter syndrome, and stepping into a life that is fulfilling, courageous, and intentional, then my new podcast episodes, starting from episode 21, are the ones you're looking for. You're listening to episode 10 of the Midlife Awakening podcast with Makaela Moore. Welcome to the Midlife Awakening podcast. I'm Makaela Moore, your host and certified transformation coach. I'm a 40-something woman who nerds out on brain science and believes every woman should be financially independent. This podcast is for women navigating their midlife who want to learn the secrets to unlocking their brain and freeing themselves from everything that holds them back so they can create lasting change in their lives, because everything is possible. Join me each week for conversations about the midlife and tips and tricks to hack your subconscious brain so you can deliberately transform your life and ultimately create your own financial security. First time here? Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Enjoy! Hello, and it has been another busy week with all the things, and I'm sitting here recording this week's episode on a Wednesday, which is actually podcast release day. I usually try to record it at least a day in advance, but that's not happening this week. So as I sit here, it is Wednesday the 6th of November, and there are currently only 55 days left of this year. But bigger than that is that there is only 55 days left of this decade. And when I realised that a couple of weeks ago, that we were about to enter a whole new decade, it made me think about all the things that I had planned to do, but hadn't actually done yet. Like, if I go back a couple of years, I absolutely would have thought that by the end of this decade that I would have lost all the weight that I wanted to, but I haven't. I've lost some, and it's a journey, but I'm not there yet. And if I went back even just 2 years ago, I thought by now my business would be much bigger than it is and, earning squillions of dollars, but I'm not there yet. Again, I'm making things happen, but I'm not at the stage that I thought I'd be or wanted to be. So I got to thinking about goals and New Year's resolutions and all that jazz. Firstly, I would love to know how many of you set New Year's resolutions each year, or how many of you have ever set one. And then I would love to know how many of you were actually able to stick with the resolution for more than, say, 2 or 3 weeks. And of course, how many of you actually achieved the result you're after. There are some statistics floating around that only 25% of people stick with their New Year's resolution for a few weeks, and only 8% of people actually achieve what they set out to. It's not a large number by any means. So honestly, what does that say about people in general? Most of us make it mean something about us, like we're lazy or we're hopeless or useless or can't commit to anything, or that, we're not worthy enough to achieve that goal in our life, or that we're not good enough to do what other people seem to easily achieve. I'll bet you've said at least one of those things to yourself at some stage in the past. Those would all be stories that we are making up in our heads, which the more we tell ourselves those reasons why we don't achieve the goal, the more we perpetuate the made-up story and then turn it into a reality. But today's podcast isn't about stories, or at least not specifically. Today, I just want to talk about goals and resolutions and bust a few myths. So if we take a look at a typical December for any of us, for those of us in Australia, our kids are coming to the end of their school year, which means loads of end-of-year activities, concerts, break-up parties, events, etc. And then the onslaught of having our kids at home with us for 8 whole weeks, asking what they can do now because they're bored. And then there's all the end of year adult social events, the breakup parties, Christmas parties, and we suddenly get hit with invitations from long lost friends that we haven't heard from all year saying, we must catch up for a drink before Christmas. This one always gets me because I don't understand why we must catch up before Christmas. We've got all year to catch up. Let's do it when things are less crazy. December is a totally crazy time with all of that. And of course, we then have Christmas, which, as much as I love Christmas, I just find it crazy that we spend weeks planning and agonizing over presents and decorations and meals, all for the better part of just one day, if that. I know as a mum of a young child who still experiences the magic of Christmas, it can be very time consuming to get everything just right for them and to make sure that Santa is on board and to make sure that our elves on the shelves are doing their jobs. There is a lot of things going on. Many people get to take holidays at this time of year, so they plan trips away, which even though they're going away to relax, the planning and getting ready for the trip itself brings on a whole other lot of mental stress just to add to all the other stresses of this time of year. And this amounts to an awful lot of mental load and stress if we allow it to all get out of control. Our brains are just not wired to cope with it all, which is why we get to Boxing Day on December 26th and most of us fall in a heap on the couch in front of the cricket on TV, eating Christmas leftovers for days, not leaving the house, and not making any decisions more important than, do I want leftover ham, chicken or turkey on my sandwich? And to those who hit the Boxing Day sales, I tip my hat to you, because I just don't have the energy to leave my house on Boxing Day. Decision fatigue at this time of year is very, very real, and we don't really even stop to consider it. And then we wonder why we are so freaking exhausted. I'm going to talk more in next week's podcast episode about brain fatigue and decision fatigue and what we can do to cope with it and the ways that we can help prevent it. It's something I've been doing a lot of research into lately, and to be honest, it deserves an entire episode all on its own. I must admit, I am managing to make Christmas more simple for us each and every year. I stopped hanging all the Christmas decorations and, I just kept it at the simple with just the tree and some basic things around the lounge room and then, just the front door wreath. We've even gone back to basics with the food and the presents, choosing to make this day more about a magical experience for our daughter and just a nice, relaxing family day more than anything else. December makes people totally crazy, and I can only imagine that over in the US, where they also celebrate Thanksgiving and Halloween, that it ends up being a really crazy quarter for them, not just a crazy month or two. Even in business though, everyone is in a rush to get to the finish line of the year. This time of year in our cabinet making business is always hectic because everyone wants their kitchens finished before Christmas. And most years, we stop taking bookings for the year around July because we just can't do it all. So once Christmas is over, the hams and the turkeys are eaten, presents opened, wrapping tossed, drinks consumed, families hosted or visited, and we finally start to relax in those days following Christmas, we are then hit with the new year. And if you watch much television at all, you will know that this is when all the weight loss ads appear by the million on our TV screens, because that's when people are starting to think about their New Year's resolutions and what they may want to achieve for the new year. We see the ads, or we go to the beach, and we judge ourselves. We judge others, and we compare. The more we compare ourselves to others, the worse we feel about ourselves, because from the outside, it looks like everyone else has their shit together except us, which it can leave us feeling inadequate and create that cycle of not feeling good in our own skin, and therefore in a place of lack. So we try to do all the things to get out of that, and the more we do, the more resistance our brains put up to stop us doing the things, and we end up in this perpetual cycle of feeling terrible and not getting anywhere. And then because we're not getting anywhere, we feel more terrible about ourselves. And so much of it is because our brains are just too tired. They're fatigued. And by January, our brain is totally exhausted after all the rush of December and Christmas and year end. So what I really wanted to talk about today was why we find it so damned hard to follow through with our New Year's resolutions or just goal setting in general. If we're talking New Year's resolutions, part of it is that time of year. We're already fatigued from December. Our brains are overloaded. But there's also the flip side of that, and that's January. And getting back to work and getting our kids back to school for a new year, into new classes with new books and supplies and uniforms and all the things that go with back to school. I can almost guarantee that out of those 8% of people who actually follow through on their resolutions, or even out of the 25% who stick to them for a few weeks, that not many of them were women with families. Most of us have the kids at home through December and January on their school holidays. Us women are mostly the ones who organise all that goes with Christmas, and we are, in most cases, the ones who are getting the kids back to school. I know that that's not the case in every household, but mostly. During December and January, us women are generally placed last on our priority list because there is just so much to do for everyone else. I'm not going to go into self-care this week, but you'll be hearing about that next week, along with brain care. Are you exhausted yet, even just thinking about all those things that are just around the corner for us in a few weeks? I'm exhausted just saying it all. But back to resolutions. Is it any wonder that most women, and I'm sure men too, don't stick to their New Year's resolutions? Our brains are overloaded. They're just fried. But if we also look at, if we were to start a goal setting process, say in the middle of the year or any other time of the year that's just not December or January, do we actually find it any easier? The answer for most people is going to be a yes and a no. And, it doesn't matter whether it's in amongst the chaos that is the New Year period or any other time. If we're trying to do or be things that we are not in the habit of doing or being, then our brain will resist them because they are new and they're not predictable. Remember, our brains like to keep us safe through predictability. Those new things that we're trying to achieve in our life are possible threats to our very survival as far as our subconscious brains are concerned. You can use all the willpower, create all the vision boards and do all the affirmations that you want. But until we change our mindset from within, anything we do on the outside will fall by the wayside. Instead of creating a goal or a vision for ourselves based on comparing ourselves to everyone else or on any external validation, we first need to ask ourselves how we want to feel and then create our goals from that feeling, because feelings drive our actions. If you've ever noticed what motivates you to do anything in any given moment, it's a feeling, which was firstly created by a thought. As humans, we are driven by our emotions, and if we don't feel like doing something, usually we don't. And that's because we don't want to feel discomfort or pain or stress or overwhelm. But if you think about when we organise all the things for Christmas or a birthday party or a wedding or another major event in our life that we are really excited about, we actually tend to overlook the discomfort and the stress because we're just so damned excited that we just go and do it anyway. And that's what I mean by being driven by our emotions. But it's when we don't feel like doing something that we let ourselves get in the way of ourselves. And that is called self-sabotage. Self-sabotage is how we react to our emotions, and it's a subconscious choice that we make to feel differently about something, like not feeling the discomfort of doing something that we don't like doing. We also procrastinate because we have a fear of failure or of not getting the result that we want quick enough, or not getting the right result full stop. often if we're not getting the result that we want quick enough, we quit because it's not working. But quitting definitely doesn't get us any closer to our goal. Imagine if you had started that thing you really want a year ago and had been consistent at trying to achieve it. Imagine how far along that journey you'd be now. I know if I'd stopped choosing to be overweight a year ago, I wouldn't be as overweight now. Or if I had stopped procrastinating, got over my insecurities and just got on with building my business a year ago, I'd be so much further along by now. But oftentimes the universe does have other plans for us, and we're often in exactly the place we need to be right now. One of my coaches talks about the universe having a grand plan for us, and that as cosmic beings, our lives are mapped out for us. We just need to trust in the universe and allow it to provide for us. In theory, I can see some merit there, but I also think that if we give our complete control over and just go with the flow, that we may end up just drifting through this life aimlessly, not achieving things that we actually really want to do. So as cosmic human beings, if we do want to have some control over our life, then we have to stop all the self-sabotage. We have to stop all the bullshit stories in our head about why we can't achieve the things we want. Remembering that you may not even be aware of those stories, so you'll need to go on a bit of a reconnaissance mission inside your brain to look for and start busting those old stories that are no longer serving you. We have intrinsic beliefs about what we can and can't achieve. So if we set out to do something that our subconscious believes we can't do, we will subconsciously self-sabotage. And because it's a subconscious reaction, we don't even realize that that is what we're doing. When we set big goals, we still have our old habits and patterns that prevent us from achieving the results of the big goal. Things like I'm not worthy or capable or smart enough for that big goal. Firstly, we need to recognize these patterns of thought. We need to call them out for what they are. We need to become aware of what we're feeling and recognize what we would usually do when we feel this feeling. We need to learn to sit in the discomfort of this negative feeling without buffering it with eating or drinking or binging on Netflix or social media. We need to learn to get comfortable with the uncomfortable if we want to achieve things. We have a desire to be comfortable all the time, and we self-sabotage because we would rather not feel the discomfort. We'd rather avoid or buffer it, and therefore we procrastinate. It's really easy for me to sit here and say that you just need to get comfortable with discomfort, but it's another thing to actually start doing all the things. Yes, you need to learn to sit in that discomfort and be okay in that place, but if we don't look underneath at who we are being and what habits are driving us, then there will be no forward motion. Everything we do in life comes back to habits. Think of someone you know who perhaps gets up at 5 a.m. every day to go and exercise, and then they come home, they make a green smoothie, they get the kids off to school, do all the things of their day and still manage to have a tidy house, and they're super organized. Most of us think of someone like that and think it must be some mythical superwoman. I get it. But that woman only got that way because of habits. They are in the habit of getting out of bed at 5:30 every single morning. They are in the habit of their chosen exercise. They are in the habit of making that smoothie and tidying the house and being organized. Every single thing is a habit. And they didn't start by doing all those things on the one day. Habits take time to build up, and once we can tie habits together, they become even more ingrained in our brain. Like getting dressed in your exercise gear as soon as you spring out of bed, or making that green smoothie as soon as you walk in the door from your morning walk, or putting all the dishes in the dishwasher and turning it on just before walking out the door for the school run. When we start doing a new activity, it fires off a new neuron in our brain, which when we continue to do this new activity, slowly but surely it becomes a neural pathway that becomes well worn in our brain the more we do something. And once these pathways are worn into our brain or ingrained or myelinated, they don't go away. They can be replaced by other pathways, but they do always remain somewhere underneath, which is why we never forget how to ride a bike or which way to drive to a certain destination. When we start pairing our activities and creating strings of habits, these actually become much stronger neural pathways than singular habits, and we are much more likely to do them and achieve our goals. So forming new habits is one key to achieving your goals. Another key is to replace old habits with new ones, which is an exercise in itself, and I will be teaching this along with a whole lot of other goodness in the group coaching program that I am launching at the end of January, after all the kids are back at school and us mums can actually focus on ourselves for a moment. Be committed to helping yourself reach your goals every day by practicing creating new habits and by linking them to other habits. If it helps to have the voice of a coach in your head, then create a coach in your head and ask them questions. You'll soon be finding the answers that you need to hear. Build momentum by creating one new habit at a time. If you attempt to implement a bunch of new habits, none of them are going to stick. Just like any muscle, the more you use it, the better it works. Think of your individual habits as muscles and exercise each one accordingly. Just like my confidence muscle when I launched this podcast, I just did it like I had the confidence of a seasoned podcaster. And the more I did it, the more my confidence grew. We need to be the person we want to be before we can do all the things. And the more we do the uncomfortable things and the better we get at them, the more momentum we'll build and the further or faster we're going to go. Do things when you don't feel like doing them and remember exactly why you're doing them. Rome was not built in a day, and you are not going to achieve your big goals in a day or a week either. That old saying, if anything worth doing is worth doing right, or something like that. I think I've totally stuffed that one up. Basically, if you really want it, be patient, take baby steps. Know that the time will pass anyway, whether you're doing the things or not. So you may as well just do them. Because you don't want to get to the end of 2020 and think to yourself, oh wow, if I'd started that thing a year ago, look where I might be now. Go and write yourself a letter. It will be from future you in, say, 1 or 2 or even 5 years' time to the you of right now. What would future you write to current you? Would future you be thanking current you for taking action, for getting uncomfortable for a little while and achieving the big thing that you might be thinking is impossible right now? I'm going to be running a free challenge early December to help all of my wonderful listeners to start discovering their stories and changing habits. It will be a reset of the mindset, I suppose. It might be about 10 to 14 days. I am still working out the details. And it's just going to simply be an email in your inbox each morning, a Facebook group for the challenge, and me popping in each day with a little lesson and an easy task for you to do to get your brain primed for transformation. So you can unlock it and start getting unstuck and busting those stories and limiting beliefs. It will be a free challenge with no strings attached, just a pretty imaginary bow as an early Christmas gift to you from me. So if you're interested, send me an email, Makaela@makaelamore.com, with in the header just put free challenge, or you can head over to my Instagram page, which is @makaela.more, and slide into my DMs letting me know that you're interested. I don't have a sign-up page yet, but I am just taking some big imperfect action at the moment, so I'll get there. That is all from me this week. I feel like I haven't really done this topic justice, and to be honest, that's because it is just such a huge topic. But tune in again next week because it will be a bit like part 2 of this episode, where I talk about brain overload and overwhelm and how we can minimize it, particularly with that silly season upon us. Thanks for listening. Bye for now. And that, my beautiful friends, is another episode of The Midlife Awakening. If you'd like more inspiration or to connect with other midlifers, head on over to my Facebook group, Deliberately Transformed. You'll find the link in the show notes. Until next time, cheers.